Hello and welcome to Delivering Feedback with Tact and Finesse. My name is Joe Jotkowitz and I'm with the Executive Advisory. I am a communication consultant and have been working in the field of communication, learning and development, executive coaching, training and development for about 25 years now. The idea behind today is to start to take a look at the value, the importance of feedback, and how we can deliver it in a clear, organized, constructive manner. In addition, I will be recording today's session for follow-up purposes. When talking about feedback, I'm always reminded of a gentleman that I used to work with some time ago. His idea of feedback was bringing his team together and asking everybody, so how well do you think you're doing? And then as people started to share their responses, he would interrupt and say, whoa, not so fast. Jacob, you stay, everybody else can go. And that was his way of saying that somebody wasn't necessarily doing a great job. Not always the best way to provide feedback. So as we take a look at feedback today, we are going to try and do it with this thread of tact and finesse, or as I sometimes affectionately refer to this as sometimes being able to tell people that their baby is ugly, but then having them thank you for it. So as we get into it, we're going to try something a little interactive here. First, I am going to ask everybody to grab a piece of paper if you can, a pen and or a pencil. I'll give you just about 30 seconds or so to do this. Grab a paper and a pen or pencil, and I am going to ask you to draw something for me. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I'm going to read a series of instructions as we go through this, and I'm going to ask you to try and follow along as much as possible. So here we go. Hopefully you've got a paper or pad with a pen or pencil in hand, and I'm going to ask you to play along in the home version, so to speak. All right. First, I'm going to ask you to draw a vertical rectangle. Draw a vertical rectangle on that piece of paper. Second, inside the rectangle, draw a circle on top of a square on top of a triangle. Draw a circle on top of a square on top of a triangle. Third, on top of the rectangle, draw a line from the center up and to the right at a 45-degree angle until the length of that line reaches the right side of the rectangle. Step 4, do the same by drawing another line on top of the rectangle, but going to the left. Step 5, draw 2 parallel lines under the rectangle that begin under the corners of the triangle and go down about 1 inch. And step 6, draw a small line at the end of each parallel line facing outward in opposite directions. So this is an exercise that I use quite often in workshops, group programs, to start to demonstrate the importance and the value of communication. If we are in a live session, a lot of the times I ask people to go ahead and hold up their pictures. And as you might imagine, if I've got 50 people in the program, you've got 50 different pictures. If I've got 25 people in the program, you've got pictures of things that look like machines or aliens or what have you. It is fascinating, as clear as sometimes we think we are with our communication, it doesn't always translate. So here, let's go through this a little bit and take a look at perhaps, did your picture end up coming out like this? I will reread the instructions as we go through it this time. First, I had said, step 1, draw a vertical rectangle. Step 2, inside the rectangle, draw a circle on top of a square on top of a triangle. Step 3, on top of the rectangle, Draw a line from the center going up and to the right at a 45-degree angle until the length of the line reaches the right side of the triangle, of the rectangle. Step 4, do the same by drawing another line but going to the left. Step 5, draw 2 parallel lines under the rectangle that begin under the corners of the triangle and go about 1 inch down. And step 6, draw a small line at the edge of each parallel line facing outward in opposite directions. So it is very rare that I get individuals that have a picture that look exactly like this. Sometimes you do find some similarities, but the point being that a lot of the times we think we are very clear, specific, detailed in our communication, but it doesn't always translate. It's the same when we think about feedback. There are probably a number of things that I could have done a little bit more effectively in this exercise. A lot of the times people come back and say, well, if you had started with a big picture overview, in the end, this is going to look like a stoplight, perhaps with legs and TV antenna. And of course, if you're going to use a reference like TV antenna or rabbit ears even, you've got to make sure that people understand the references that you are using. In addition, I might have been a little bit more specific in certain aspects. I only used the word 1 inch, trying to create measurement once when I did the legs. And it's possible I could have used more specific language when talking about how big I wanted the triangle or the rectangle and where perhaps on the page. So the idea of specificity is absolutely critical. And lastly, this definitely works a lot more effectively when there is a two-way as opposed to just a one-way interaction, a one-way communication. Getting some feedback might have helped. So when we take a look at our communication, especially when it comes to communicating expectations and providing people feedback, these are some of the concepts that we want to make sure that we incorporate. Number one, are we being big picture and providing people with the context and the background for the information that we are giving them? Are we being specific? Going down to a level of specificity where people are very clear on exactly not only what we need them to do, but also how perhaps we need them to do it. Do we offer the opportunity for interaction? Do we ask questions along the way? Do we check in with people along the way? All of these aspects can apply to the idea of communication, especially as it relates to feedback. So generally as managers, as leaders, professionals, there is a lot of expectation on us. We have a lot of responsibility. But I will argue that there are two things when we are managing, when we are leading people, that we are not necessarily responsible for. Number one, I say that we are not responsible for employees' ability to do the job. They need to take ownership and responsibility to make sure the job gets done. In addition, I will say that we are not responsible for their own professional growth and development. Employees, professionals need to take the ownership and responsibility for their own growth and development. So where does our responsibility lie as managers, as leaders? Well, it is to make sure that we are giving them the necessary communication, making sure that we are clear with expectations, making sure that we're providing feedback along the way, that we are coaching along the way, which could be a whole nother webinar. If necessary, perhaps even having difficult conversations if needed, which would be another webinar. We're also responsible to make sure that people have the tools and the resources in order to do the job, along with the ongoing support. As a matter of fact, organizations, companies, whether it is nonprofit, for-profit, are responsible to create, maintain an environment where this can happen. So what we want to do is take a look at where our responsibility lies. As managers, as leaders in an organization, whether large or small, there are certain things that we should be doing in order to fulfill that responsibility. And one of those is making sure that we are giving people feedback on an ongoing basis. However, as you might imagine, sometimes people have challenge with providing that feedback. As a matter of fact, if I was to tell you, I've got feedback for you, let's do this. I'll tell you what, let's play with this a little bit. If I was to tell you, I've got feedback for you, I'm going to ask you to type in the chat box, in the chat function, I want you to type out, what is your first response? What is the first thing that comes to mind when somebody says, I've got feedback for you? Oh no, I did something wrong. Ew. Oh my God, it's negative. Uh-oh. Oh, what the hell did I do? Oh, what did I do this time? These are great. I find it fascinating regarding okay, fair enough. Excellent. All right, so we got one that said it is a chance to grow and learn. Absolutely. And that's kind of the way we want to take a look at feedback. So one of the first things we want to think about is how do we reframe feedback? Based on all of the options, the items that you just put to me in the chat, generally, I will say 80 to 90% of the time, there's this feeling that it is negative. It is punitive. Somebody's pointing out mistakes, perhaps. But what if I told you I've got some information that will help you do your job a little easier? As a matter of fact, perhaps even a little bit more effective or efficient, maybe even more productive with less stress. That's really all feedback is. Feedback is just information. The way that I generally describe it is our professional GPS, our performance GPS. And similarly to Google Maps or Waze, when you're driving down the road and you put in your destination, we need that feedback as we're going in order to make sure that we are continuously going on the right route. Or if we accidentally make a mistake and we get off too early or we make a wrong turn, we need that feedback from our GPS to once again tell us, hey, idiot, turn around and get back on the right road. Otherwise, if we don't get that feedback, number one, we're not sure if we are headed in the right direction. And number two, if we're going off in the wrong direction, it can continue to spiral out of control. And as a result, create more stress and more loss. So first things first, think about reframing the idea of feedback as just information. It's our performance GPS, and we want it. As a result, maybe one of the things that we can do is seek it out more, ask more. In addition, as managers and leaders, it's probably something we can provide more often. However, we want to make sure that we are providing feedback in a constructive manner. And when I use the term constructive, I mean constructive in that it is helpful. I'm not referring to constructive as negative. I know sometimes that is the connotation, but all feedback should be constructive. All feedback should be helpful. So here's some examples of feedback that I have collected over the years. I'm going to ask you afterwards what's your initial take on these. These are examples from all levels of the organization. Number one, great job. You did a great job on that. Or you really blew that one. Your attitude, it's not working. You need to change it. Get that done. You didn't do what we agreed. What the heck happened? I like you, but this wasn't necessarily your best work. Why don't you rethink it and get back to me? You really went above and beyond. I would love to have 10 more people just like you. You totally messed that up. You didn't follow the plan. You better fix it next time. So you take a look at examples of feedback like this. And what's the challenge here? Once again, in that chat box, if you would, type out, what is your initial reaction to feedback like this? Okay, it's not specific enough. Great. It's vague. Would like to see some specifics. It's too emotional, too subjective. Great. What the heck does this mean? Excellent. Yeah, this is part of the challenge with providing people information like this and thinking that we are giving people feedback. It is unclear, as you say, Grace. There's really not a lot here to work from, Lynn. Absolutely. So one of the things that we will pose is that compliments and criticism are not feedback. This is what I would call our compliments and criticism. But don't think that we are doing people a service if we are providing compliments and criticism and thinking of it as feedback. What we want to do is, just as you pointed out, we need to be a little bit more specific about it. So let's take a look at a few examples here. How can we make these a little bit more effective? If we want to tell somebody that perhaps they could improve their communication, what might be something specific that you would point to? Go ahead and type in the chat again. What might be something specific you would point to around improving communication? All right, you might talk about their clarity of message. You might discuss the ability, the need to touch base more frequently, word choice perhaps, maybe avoiding interruption, letting people finish, more concise, getting to the point. Their tone, absolutely. As a matter of fact, the tone, once again, tone again, excellent. There's a technique that I will use with people when I'm working with them, especially one-on-one, a body language, another good one, around tone. And I will tell people that if you can end your sentences, questions, comments with the following 2 words, you dummy, that's probably not the best tone of voice. Really? You thought that was a great idea? You dummy. So these types of specifics, though, can really help emphasize the point. You hit on a lot of these. People can be a little bit more concise. You can tell people perhaps they can speak up more often, structure emails a little bit more in an organized fashion. Here's another one. How about, I like the plan you put together. How might you say that a little bit more specifically, with a little bit more precision? I like the plan you put together. What about that plan might you have liked, so to speak? Excellent. All right. So it was very well organized. It was feasible. The specifics of the plan were easy to follow. Thanks, Amy. It will save us time. All right. So now that's talking about the impact of the plan. Absolutely. A piece that we might want to make sure that we include. The plan was complete, was comprehensive. Thanks, Sue. Absolutely. So these are some great examples in taking the comment, I like the plan, but trying to make it a little bit more specific. Let's do one last one. I'm sorry, a topical, practical, organized. The plan involved everyone, very inclusive, really appreciated. All of these are items that you could speak to, but you'll notice they are a lot more specific. Last one, and this is one that I tend to get questions about pretty often. You've got a poor attitude. How do you give somebody feedback about a poor attitude? What might be something specific that you can point to? I actually recently wrote an article talking about giving feedback to somebody with a poor attitude without necessarily getting attitude. What might you point to if the feedback you want to provide is around a poor attitude? Sure, Mandy, I can definitely send out that article for you. All right. So I've been getting comments from your customers and perhaps even providing a little bit more specific around what some of those comments were. Not necessarily providing people eye contact when they are talking to you, rolling your eyes when customers are complaining, or even stepping back and saying, well, that's not my role, that's not my job, I don't know what to tell you. So that is a little bit more specific. This is a great one. Elaine, you talk about not participating or saying things that are negative. Defensiveness is a one that might also implicate attitude. However, defensive in and of itself can be a little vague. If you're talking about defensiveness, what you want to try and do is point to those behaviors that really communicate defensiveness. As a matter of fact, we'll take a look at a little bit of an example in a bit here. Oh, that's another great. Checking your cell phone in staff meetings, absolutely. Or while on the Zoom, people were able to see that you were typing and working on something else. As a matter of fact, you got asked a couple of questions and you just kind of dismissed them without actually answering them. So once again, the point here being that we want to make sure we are getting to specifics, we're getting to actions. Maybe stop interrupting, volunteer more, avoid rolling your eyes. These might be behaviors that speak to attitude. The key here is to get to that behavioral level. We want to focus on behaviors and actions. One of the ways to think about this is if you are viewing your employee's performance, let's say on a television show or in a movie, and you were to turn the volume all the way up, but look away from the screen, what do you hear from people? Is it their tone, their volume? Is it that they're long-winded? Are they being redundant or repetitive? Are they using a lot of fillers? Are they not answering the question that's asked? All of these would be what we call how you sound types of behaviors. Another way to do this is to watch the screen, watch the performance, but perhaps turn the volume all the way down. What do you see? Is it the rolling of the eyes? Is it the shaking of the head? Is it the avoiding eye contact and working on other things? This will help us get down to that behavioral level. Basically, when you are trying to get to behaviors and actions, it really should be able to boil down to a basic premise of either do it or stop it. If we're able to boil it down to that, then we are usually getting to that level of specificity that people are looking for. So let's start to take some of these principles and put it into play by constructing some feedback. One of the tools that we talk about is our GAIN template when providing feedback. For those that have worked with me before, this might look a little familiar, but these are some of the steps that we generally recommend when providing feedback. First, the recommendation here is to begin with the goal, the expectation. Our team's goal is, the expectation is, the standard here is, one of the things we're trying to do is. In our last team meeting, we all agreed that we would fill in the blank. The reason behind beginning with the goal is it helps to set a baseline, set a foundation, number one. Number two, you usually get buy-in right from the get-go when you begin with the goal. If, for example, you turn to somebody and say, one of the things we're trying to do is be a little bit more collaborative. It's very rare that you're going to get somebody to say, no, it's not. I've never heard that before. Or our goal is to make sure that we overperform, we exceed customer expectations. It's rare that you're going to get somebody to disagree with you. Nope, my goal is to just barely meet expectations and that's it. So you usually get that buy-in right from the get-go. In addition, where do you start, where can you find these expectations, these goals? They're really all over. You talk about departmental expectations, company vision, mission, strategy, KPIs, process, procedure, employee manual, the job description, the law. All of these give us direction on what we should be doing and perhaps even how we should be doing it. So first begin with the goal in mind. Then we want to move to that action. And as we just got done talking about, that action is that observable behavior. It is what I see, what I hear from folks. As a matter of fact, one of the tips that we provide is if you can date and timestamp the action, it's usually a little bit more concrete. Yesterday in the morning, this is what I saw. Yesterday in the meeting, this is what I saw. On the email that you sent out to everybody last week, this is what I read. Reviewing your second quarter reports, this is what I've observed. So if you can date and timestamp it, it tends to have a little bit more of a concrete nature to it. The third piece is the impact. The impact answers the question, why the heck does this matter? And there's a couple of ways to communicate this. First, you can communicate, share the impact, tying it right back up to the goal. As a result, it helped us accomplish the goal. Or unfortunately, this did not help us achieve that goal that we had talked about. Second, you can also communicate the impact in a way that ties to their motivation. If, for example, let's say I am working with somebody and they have expressed a desire to grow, develop, maybe even be put on higher level projects. I might say, well, the impact of this is that we did not come across as collaborative as we had wanted. In addition, this makes it a little bit more challenging to continue to think about those higher profile projects that I know you and I have discussed. If you can tie it into their motivation, perhaps things that they have shared with you that they want, then what you will find is that they will buy into the feedback a little bit more and ideally start to take more ownership over it. And then the last piece is next action. Now, next action also has two aspects to it. If this is a piece of what we refer to as praise feedback, and I'll give you some examples in just a minute. Praise feedback is reinforcing behavior. So if it's a piece of praise feedback, then the next action is probably going to ask them to continue that behavior, continue down that path. However, if it is a piece of what we call improvement feedback, where you're trying to improve or perhaps redirect behavior, then you might ask them, what do you think would work more effectively next time? How might you approach this a little bit differently next time around? And you've got the ability to ask them what their take on it is. If you've laid out the feedback up top with goal, action, and impact very clearly, you will lead them right into some of the next actions that they should be considering. And the value in asking them what their take is, what they think we should do, is that then it creates more buy-in again. And generally what we have found is people do not destroy houses, they build. So if they are a part of the solution on how to improve, usually they are bought off more on making sure it occurs for the long term. So let's take a look at this template and put it into real-time practice here. I'm going to give you a few examples. The examples that you will see are wordsmithed according to me, Joe. But I do want you to think about using something like this, using what I say is your own language. I say that these types of tools that we provide, and we've got a lot of them, this is the sheet music, but it's really up to you to be able to find your own tune. So let's take a look at a few examples of perhaps how I might structure it. So here, the goal. You know how we value professional communication. I mean, our goal is to make sure that slide decks, handouts, visuals all communicate a clear, consistent message. Once again, I'm clearly establishing what's the foundation, what's the expectation. This is probably something I've even shared or discussed before. The idea of recommunicating it helps to set the stage here. So then I go into the action. Your past 2 quarterly reviews really hit the mark. They were organized and clearly outlined which channels produced the highest increase in sales. They also showed where our largest decrease in adjusted expenses came from. In addition, you provided just the right level of data and support without getting too detailed or tangential, especially for this audience. So you can see how specific I am here. I'm mentioning 2 or 3 things that I observed during that presentation. As a result, I saw people asking thought-provoking questions and walk away with a clear understanding of the first half of the year and how we should think about moving forward. So this speaks back up to the impact, the value, the benefit of doing this. Perhaps if this individual was looking for higher profile projects, this might be another impact piece that I can include. As a matter of fact, I'd like to continue to consider you for potentially other presentations like this as well. As a matter of fact, next steps, how would you feel about doing Q3 as well as the year-end presentation? Or what if we also thought about bringing in Stan on this as he's learning to get better with presenting financials? Especially if this individual has been talking about being a manager and wanting to take on some managerial responsibilities. This might be a good indirect type of reporting learning opportunity for this person. So this is an example of praise feedback. One more on the praise side. The goal is, one of our expectations is to ensure that people know how service-oriented we are. We want to be perceived as flexible, easy to work with, as well as likable and approachable. As a matter of fact, we believe it distinguishes us from others. So here I'm clearly laying out the expectation and even describing why it's so important. This is what I saw. This is the action. During this morning's meeting with our new client, notice it's date and time stamped this morning, during this morning's meeting, I thought you really showed that service level we try and promote. Specifics. I was very appreciative to see you offer to help the client during odd hours, including both early mornings and late evenings. In addition, your friendly demeanor and willingness to have small talk demonstrated that we're here to build a relationship. And as a result, I saw how people responded to you. Their faces lit up. They thanked you for their willingness for your willingness to help. In addition, their manager sent me a complimentary email about you and asked that you be on the account for future meetings as well. So next steps, how would you feel taking this on as a co-lead? What support do you need from me? And perhaps now this turns into a conversation on what else I can do to support you, how you felt about this, what might be some of those techniques, some of those tactics that you want to make sure you use next time around. But this is much, much better than saying, hey, great job in that meeting. You know what, with the client, I thought you were awesome. I might not know exactly what it was that you thought was so awesome. As a matter of fact, maybe I even pick up on the wrong thing. Maybe my perception was that the client was getting off topic and I interrupted her 4 or 5 times in order to get back on topic. So I think that is in fact what it is that you thought was so important. And maybe that's the behavior that I repeat. So you want to make sure that you are providing that praise feedback, not praise compliment. Praise feedback is much more complete, much more specific, and I know exactly what to do with it and why it's so important. Those behaviors that get rewarded get repeated. Now let's take a look at another example. These are both praise examples. Let's take a look at what if I'm trying to improve feedback. The goal here, first, we want to make sure that we come across collaborative and pitch in to work with other teams. As a matter of fact, cross-functional collaboration is one of our organizational initiatives this year, and we want to move away from operating as silos. It is rare that you're going to get pushback. No. I think it's best that we operate as silos. So once again, you see the value, the benefit of recommunicating the goal, the foundation. Action. During our touch base this morning with HR, they reviewed the teamwork initiatives they are creating. I noticed that you didn't offer to be on any of the 3 committees. In addition, when they were discussing mid-year reviews, you turned off your camera. As a result, this didn't show our willingness to work with them and be collaborative. Candidly, I fear it came across as avoiding HR and not really respecting the work they're doing. So you'll see how, once again, the impact here ties right back to the goal in that we didn't necessarily accomplish it. Now, the next piece I'm going to show you is a little bit of what I call the tact and finesse. This is the oil that allows the feedback to go down a little smoother. It's what I refer to as a BOD, a benefit of doubt statement. A very simple phrase such as, I don't think that was the intention. Here's where it comes from. Over the years, we have learned that for the most part, 99.9% of the time, people do not go to work to try and do a bad job. We do not intend to make life difficult. We do not try to annoy people or fail 0.9% of the time. So this benefit of the doubt statement, it gives people that benefit of the doubt that they intended to try and do something effective. Or there might have been extenuating circumstances. It allows people to save face. And what happens is it allows the hair on the back of their neck to go down a little bit by merely saying, I don't think that was the intention. Now, when you say, I don't think that was the intention, what you are referring to is the impact, not the action. You are not saying that I don't think you intended to not volunteer. I don't think you intended to turn off your camera, perhaps, in order to come across as not being collaborative. What you are saying is, I don't think you meant to come across as collaborative. I don't think you meant to disrespect HR. So let's take a look at what we can do in order to avoid that impression next time around. Maybe even go into, mind if I ask if there was anything going on with you today? You know, maybe somebody was having a bad day and it's really just a matter of doing some discovery here. Are you okay? You know, do you mind if I ask, why did you do that? Or why didn't you volunteer for those committees? What was going on? Maybe we start to find out that they're feeling overloaded and then all of a sudden it becomes a deeper conversation. Eventually what we want to do is probably move the discussion to a point of how they might do this differently next time. This last piece around next action is forward looking. What is it that we can do moving into the future? Let's do one more example. The goal is, we've talked about ownership and accountability before. As a matter of fact, our last departmental meeting focused on just that, and we brought in that guy, Alan, to come talk to us about extreme ownership. Do you remember that? Well, during our team meeting on Monday, when we were reviewing project status, your update didn't have any new progress from 2 weeks ago. Also, when I asked you specifically about a couple of items that were behind schedule, your response back to me in the group was, I don't know. I haven't heard anything. And then you suggested that I talk to Malcolm. I didn't get the sense that you were taking that accountability in the situation. First, you didn't have any updates. Second, you weren't able to answer my questions. And third, you deferred me to Malcolm instead of taking the ownership to find the answer. I didn't see the responsibility that's expected in this role. Now, I don't think you meant to come across that way. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit. Next time around, I'm going to ask you to provide some sort of update. I know that there has been some progress made, and it really does benefit everyone when we're all in the loop. Can you understand that? Do you see how that benefits everybody to get to the same page? And maybe even have a conversation about it. And then move into, in addition, it's okay to not know an answer. However, I'll ask that you take more responsibility in order to find the information if you don't know. Can you see why this is important as a project lead? Is there anything that I can do in order to help you here? So here are some examples on taking that gain template and really starting to wordsmith it, craft it out. The idea here is it is much more comprehensive. you are providing that big picture overview, you are giving those specifics, and then by adding the benefit of the doubt, you allow the feedback to go down just a little bit smoother. So both of these, either praise feedback or improvement feedback, are important. We are wanting to reinforce behavior as well as redirect. Now, those two can be done on their own. They can operate as standalone messages. In addition, you can even together in order to provide a much more balanced perspective. I'll give you an example. A number of years ago, I was asked to work with a local theme park, and in doing so, the request came in, and the request was, can you come in and do a workshop on listening skills? I said, sure, do you mind if I ask what's going on? And the response was, yes. What we have learned is that this generation, these kids, they just don't know how to listen to us. So I chuckled a little inside. I had asked my client, do you mind if I come in and see what you're talking about? Generally, when I get the feedback that they're not listening, people don't listen to me, I'm usually a little on the apprehensive side. So they said, sure, that'd be great. As a matter of fact, we'll give you a little bit of a tour. We'll show you what we mean. So I show up. There's a group of about 4 or 5 of us. It's me and 4 senior level individuals, and they are all sharing examples of their experience where employees and associates didn't necessarily listen, as they said. Well, as we enter the front of the park, at the very, very front, the turnstiles, there is an individual, and he is taking tickets. And in his process, he is being what I would have termed extremely friendly, very approachable. He is welcoming people. He is talking about the shows that are going on in the park that day. As a matter of fact, kids, if they came up to the front of the line, when they got there, he would get down on one knee so that he was eye level with them and greeting them. However, I did notice that his line was moving a little slower, and it was probably about 20, maybe 25 people longer than the other lines. So apparently some of the other managers noticed this as well. One of them excused themselves, went over to the gentleman, pulled him aside. I was within earshot, and said, do you think you'd be able to speed things up a little bit? Do you think you might be able to move your line along a little bit? I'm noticing it's moving a little slower than the others, and it's quite a bit longer than the others. And so this gentleman looked him in the eye, nodded, sure, no problem, ended up going back to his post, and we ended up walking off, showing other parts of the park. I was hearing other stories about listening, so to speak. We ended up swinging by the turnstiles again, the entrance, about 20, 30 minutes later, and now this guy is doing exactly what he was told. He's standing at the front of the line, and he is just ushering people in. All right, let's go, everybody, get in the line. Come on, hurry up, tickets out, no ticket, get back to the back of the line. Come on, we got to get in, we got a big day ahead of us, looking forward to it. All right, let's go. And as he is doing this, you can see the disdain, the worry, the fear in the eyes of the managers that I'm with. And the same guy, he ends up running over there. He pulls this guy aside. Another manager steps into his place in order to take over. And I'm still within earshot. And he's right up in this guy's face. And he screams, no! What the hell are you doing? Did you not go through guest service training? Do you not know how to be nice, approachable? We've got to be welcoming to these folks. And he just berates him for about a good minute or two. After which point, this guy looked like a deer in the headlights. You could tell he was totally confused. At the end, the manager's request to this employee was, do you think you could be nicer? Do you think you could be friendly? And this guy, with sort of a hesitant eye squint, kind of a head nod, said, yeah. He ended up slowly walking back to his place where he was working. The manager ended up walking back to us, the group. We walked off. We swung by one more time about 10, 15 minutes later to see how he was doing. And you might have guessed, he was now doing it the way that he was originally doing it. Hey, welcome to the park. It's great to see you. Hey, how you doing? Here's some of the things that are going on. Hope you're able to catch them. And I swear to you, that manager that just got done berating this guy turns to me and says, see, that's what we're talking about. Kids don't listen today. We need them to focus on better listening skills. So I said it's possible. I said, if I could offer another explanation, maybe the way that feedback is being provided isn't always as comprehensive as it could be. And so we started talking about basically taking the praise and the improvement feedback, but putting them into one message. And I walked him through this. I said, what if you started by saying one of the expectations that we have is that as a ticket taker, you are open, you are friendly, you're likable, you share excitement and enthusiasm about the park. As a matter of fact, when I was walking by the entrance earlier today, I saw that you were doing just that. I mean, you were looking at guests in the eyes. I saw if kids got down, you would get down on one knee in order to be at eye level with kids. You were talking about shows that were going on, and you can see your face light up. That's phenomenal. That's the exact type of guest service that we are promoting, that we want. That to us really helps set the stage, create that family, that welcoming atmosphere. And please, I'll ask you, continue to do that. In addition, we also want to make sure that people move through the line in an expeditious manner. And one of the things that I noticed was that your line was moving a little bit slower. It was about 1 to 2 minutes behind the other two lines. In addition, it was a little longer than the others, about 20 to 25 people deep. And the fear is that people start to get a little bored, maybe a little disenfranchised, even before they get into the park. Now, I don't think that's the intention whatsoever. So I was curious what it is that you might be able to do in order to adjust your approach to continue to keep that great guest service that we see, that we want, and at the same time, perhaps move people through the line just a little bit quicker. At which point, the manager very politely turned to me and said, so you're not necessarily saying it's listening skills so much as it is our communication to them. I said, well, that is a possibility. So we ended up working on a very comprehensive feedback and coaching program for that team. But the key here in using this is that when you are providing this feedback, that it really does feel as if it is a comprehensive message. This is not meant to butter people up so that then you chop their knees off with the redirecting feedback. That's not the intention here. This is not what sometimes gets referred to, excuse the language, the shit sandwich. You're not doing good, bad, good. This is really trying to provide a comprehensive picture with people. So the key is being able to connect these two pieces. And in connecting these two pieces, one of the things you might have noticed is I did not use the word but. I did not talk about the fact that this is great, but we want you to do this. The reason being, the moment you put the but in, you negate the stuff in front. So with all due respect to Sir Mix-a-Lot, no big buts. How else can you do it? You can take a look at in addition. Also, another observation I had, something else I wanted to share. Just make it more of a continuous, you're still driving down that GPS road, but there's no speed bumps in it. The bump is caused by the but. So this might be a way, a more comprehensive way in order to provide that feedback. And once again, that's our job. That's our role as managers, to be able to provide feedback in order to make sure people are clear on what's expected and how perhaps they can do it. Now, once in a while, we still might get a little bit of pushback from folks, a little bit of resistance. So how can we address that? Once again, in a very professional manner. Well, first, we want to make sure we are identifying the type of resistance we're getting and then address accordingly. So the first type of resistance is what we call, I don't get it. I'm not sure I understand. This is rational resistance. And you can usually tell because people might even ask a question about it, or there's a little bit of that trailing off in their voice. I'm not sure I totally comprehend what you're talking about. Here, people are just looking for more information. And usually we're pretty comfortable with giving it. Yeah, sure, let me give you another example. But the second type of resistance starts to get elevated a little. This is now, I don't like it. It's no longer a question mark. It's no longer an ellipse. It's now a period. I don't like it. That's not fair. You know what? I know that Sanjay did the same thing and you're not talking to him. Why are you picking on me? This is now emotional resistance. And the recommendation here is to empathize, but then redirect. I understand that this This may not be easy. However, I really cannot discuss Sanjay's performance with you, just as I wouldn't discuss your performance with him. So let's take a look at perhaps what you and I can do in order to make sure this doesn't happen again. So you empathize, but then you redirect. As managers, as leaders, sometimes here's the mistake we make, is we get this emotional resistance. I don't like it, but we respond in a rational manner with more information. Sure, no problem. Let me give you another example. And then that just escalates it into what we call, I don't like you. Now this is personal and it is highly emotional resistance. The challenge is it is very rare, if ever, we are able to solve for the issue if it gets to highly emotional resistance in the moment. Think about it this way. If you are married, a significant other, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, all of the above, no judgment. If you've ever gotten in an emotional argument, conversation, have you ever solved it right then and there in the moment? And maybe there's a couple of people that have, but I will tell you, unfortunately, from my experience, it has not occurred. So here, the recommendation is to stay calm and perhaps revisit the discussion. So we want to make sure that we are first identifying the type of resistance, if we get some, and then responding accordingly. Just a few additional techniques, suggestions before we start to wrap this up. We want to make sure that we do focus on those behaviors that impact, not the person, not the personality, avoiding things like attitude, it's not a good fit, you're not a good team player. Those just became a little bit vague, a little bit arbitrary, and unfortunately add fuel to the fire. So we want to try and focus on those behaviors, see if we can date and timestamp them. Those specific behaviors and actions help us avoid the generalities. The generalities start to become a little bit confusing. You need to do this better, more of it. Or I don't know exactly, but I'll know when I see it. We also want to try and provide sooner than later. The recommendation, if possible, is within 24 hours. Why? Well, studies will say that we forget as much as 83% of what we see in here within 24 hours. If you've ever received feedback months or even weeks after the event, and you barely remember exactly what happened, that's the challenge. We want to make sure that we do reaffirm our faith in the person, especially if we are trying to provide redirecting feedback. Once again, it's focusing on their behavior, not on them as an individual. Being able to say, I know that you can, let me know how I can help you, support you in this. I know you've got this. We want to also make sure we continue to focus on those common goals. It's generally how we want to tee up the feedback. Try and conduct this in private, if possible. If necessary. Sometimes you'll find that, especially praise feedback, some people like it in public. You will notice some people don't. Generally, improvement feedback usually occurs one-on-one in private, unless it is improvement feedback where we're trying to redirect the performance or the behavior of an entire team. Then maybe we would include everybody. We also want to be able to try and ask for input and solutions. Make it a little bit more of a two-way. When you get to the next steps, ask people, how might you continue to do this? What support do you need from me? How would you do this differently? How do you think you might be able to do this more effectively next time? See if they can come up with some of the answers. You don't want to forget that praise feedback. So often we think about feedback as only negative, only trying to improve performance. It's one of the reasons why we've got that negative stigma around it. And if appropriate, we might need to document this for future reference. That documentation can occur in an email, a note. You can take your own notes on it. And if possible, make it a regular thing, weekly to monthly. As a matter of fact, we did a survey. We did a study a number of years ago. We asked just over 5,000 people, how often do you currently receive feedback from your manager? And the responses were anywhere between yearly to bi-yearly. When we asked people, how often do you want it? The responses came back anywhere between weekly to every other week. And the explanation was this: if I am working on something 40, 50, 60, maybe as much as 120 hours, I'd like to know that I'm headed in the right direction. Because if I'm going off course and I get that feedback later down the road, I'm that much further off course, and I could have made this course correction a lot quicker, making myself a lot more effective. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we've got some ideas, some solutions to offer just in case. I know I recommended asking people, what do you think? But also having a couple of ideas in your back pocket. So lastly, we want to make sure that we follow up too. One of the things that I started to allude to before, one of the big frustrations that we hear from people is, I get feedback. I get it once a year, my annual review, or twice a year, my annual review and my mid-year review, and that's it. We want to try and do this a little bit more regularly. So maybe set up regular follow-up meetings with people, or establish those biannual, those quarterly performance reviews. What's a more formal process to use this? You can establish some checkpoints along the way. Let's check in every 2 weeks. Let's check in every Friday. Let's add this to a plan. You can even just seek self-feedback from folks. Ask people, so I know that you've been working on, how's that been going? And get some follow-up, get some input from them. Continue to provide the ongoing, using that gain feedback. Also, recognize the achievement. When you give people improvement feedback to try and improve performance, make sure you keep an eye out for when they've got the opportunity to do it. One of the biggest frustrations that we constantly hear from people is, I get feedback, but I only get it when I make mistakes. Then when I correct it, I don't hear from my manager until I make that same mistake again. And so it gets very frustrating. And it's also one of the reasons why people have a negative connotation around feedback. In addition, you can recommend additional resources, articles, TED Talks, books. Right now, there's webinars that people are offering, any of these in order to continue to help people. So, and wrapping up some of the key takeaways associated with feedback, with tact and finesse. Remember, feedback, it's your professional GPS. It's just information. Compliments and criticism, not feedback. Feedback is clear, specific. It is behavioral. Feedback needs to be focused on those actions, on those behaviors. You can use that GAIN framework that we talked through in order to deliver feedback effectively, and even take a step back with some situations, provide a balanced feedback perspective for a more comprehensive picture. But in the end, you definitely want to make sure that you follow up, follow up, follow up. It is a constant, a continuous process. Hopefully, those are a few tips, techniques, and strategies helpful around feedback. I will email out a link to this webinar. You are welcome to use, distribute as you like. In addition, if you have additional questions, comments for me, please, you are always welcome to email me. I appreciate the time. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.